Hello everyone, hopefully an OK Editor 357 here, and for today's video, I will be reviewing the visual novel Gloom and Doom. And if that's not the name of my autobiography, well, I don't know what is. Gloom and Doom is a visual novel which was released on January 27th of this year, and it was developed by, and please forgive me if I'm butchering this name, Neo Tegoel Games, who provided me with review codes for the game. You know the drill, this is a spoiler-free review, so any footage that can be seen as spoilery will be blurred or edited to avoid said spoilers. With that being said, let's head into the plot summary. Doom and Gloom follows the story of two main characters. Gloom, a wraith trying to get into heaven by killing demons to make up for something he did 400 years before the start of the story, and Winona, a depressed high schooler who is convinced she is something known as the Doombringer, which, in case the title isn't a dead giveaway, isn't a good thing. Supposedly, the Doombringer is going to end the world, but anyways, good news for Gloom. He's been assigned his final task to get into heaven, killing Winona, aka the Doombringer. Also, I should mention, she is unkillable, something she has found out after multiple failed suicide attempts and even Gloom himself trying to kill her. So they set out on a quest to figure out how to make death stick to Winona. Along the way, you will meet a unique cast of characters and be faced with a multitude of options, some as trivial as which fictional video game character is hotter and yeah, I don't know, don't ask. And some as important as deciding whether to kill some bullies harassing Winona. And these choices will shape your story and make Gloom ask himself if he wants to kill Winona, save the world from the Doombringer, and get back into heaven, or find some way to save Winona from her supposed fate of becoming the Doombringer without killing her. So first of all, Gloom and Doom does something I absolutely admire in any form of storytelling of this nature. Gloom and Doom has a very comedic and witty atmosphere throughout its story, thanks to the wonderfully written characters who bounce off each other so well, and spout any number of great pop culture references regardless of the scene they're in. That being said, this is still a serious story that deals with heavy topics like suicide, depression, and self-harm. Winona is convinced that she is the Doombringer that is going to cause the deaths of billions of people, and that's taken its toll on her. She's tried in so many different ways to kill herself to save the world from facing this threat, and every time she fails, she's tormented on an even deeper psychological level as she thinks about what she may become. Winona is a very tragic and serious character, but that doesn't stop her from still being an absolute delight to watch during her back and forth with Gloom talking about horror movie tropes or video games. Even in the most serious and heavy of scenes, chances are you will find witty banter or some sort of hilarious punchline. But this overall comedic or upbeat tone never takes away from the tragedy of Winona's situation or the real-life seriousness of depression, suicide, and self-harm. With a story so steeped in well-written comedic dialogue, it would be so easy to unintentionally make light of actual mental illness and self-harm, which is the opposite of what the story is going for. But thankfully, the writing never crosses into that territory. It brings with it a very serious and realistic depiction of the topics I mentioned earlier, but also a hopeful message, one it achieves by progressing through a story filled with some of the most hilarious writing I have ever seen. But even during moments in the story, the comedy knows when to back off and give a serious scene the full attention and detail it needs, and in a very class act which I appreciate, Neo Tegoel Games puts a warning at the very beginning of the game that says, "Suicide is mentioned casually by the characters," which makes sense. You have an unkillable girl and a centuries-old wraith as your protagonist, it's only natural death and suicide are more casual topics for them. But that suicide is a very serious topic, and if you have thoughts about harming yourself or feel unsafe, to seek urgent medical attention. In a story that deals with these heavy topics and does so in a serious but still casual way often, this is a very important thing to do, and I really like that this message is the first thing you see whenever you boot up Gloom and Doom. So yeah, Gloom and Doom already has a top-notch story with that balance of humor and seriousness alone. But let's talk about the other aspects to the story. The characters of Gloom and Doom are all so well written and memorable. First you have Gloom, a centuries-old wraith trying to earn his way back into heaven, but one who's been doing that for a while and is getting a little antsy. Despite being a floating, fiery skeleton thing, Gloom has so many emotions that show not only in his facial expressions, which I'll get to later, but in the time where he's alone and maybe talking to a piece of glass that got separated from the window it was once from because it got smashed, and the conversation definitely doesn't turn into an intense spiel that can be applied to Gloom himself. Listen, I said maybe it happens, didn't say for sure it does, but that would be a weirdly specific example for me to say if it didn't happen in the game. His friends like Lucia and Time Shaman, don't ask me what that is, you will find out if you play the game, ask him why he wants to get into heaven so badly. And he has an answer, but is it one he's completely sure of? And before he can finalize that in his head, his final task is brought to him, and throughout the game and getting to know Winona through delightful banter and heart-to-heart conversations, he has to decide whether getting back into heaven is truly what he wants and what will make him happy, and if he's willing to kill Winona, a seemingly innocent person, to do that. Also, the fact that she may be the Doombringer is thrown into the equation, but the heart of the matter is if it's what he wants and if he is willing to kill Winona for his goals. If you thought you couldn't watch a masterfully written story about self-discovery with an ancient wraith as a main character, well, you'd be wrong. Now on to Winona. Winona is a high school girl plagued with nightmares every night of causing the end of the world as the Doombringer. Because of the mental toll this takes on her, she has constantly tried to kill herself in various ways to no avail. When she's not doing that, she's just doing her best to live a normal life, going to high school, dealing with bullies, and working a part-time retail job. Her desire to die brings her to Gloom, and throughout the story, you will make a multitude of decisions as Winona, which will lead to you deciding if she is going to stick to her plan to die to avoid the potential threat of ending the world as the Doombringer, or if she's going to try to find some other way to stop this threat but keep her life in the process. Winona is a tragic character. Despite how kind of a person she is, which can be seen especially in certain decisions you are presented with throughout the story, she is convinced that her very existence is a danger to everyone, and that she needs to die. Her and Gloom make a great duo throughout the story, hopping through events and meeting new characters with enough wit to stop world hunger if we could somehow transmute wit into a food source. Listen, I'm working on it. But underneath it all is a scared and tired girl who just wants to die. Writing depressed and suicidal characters, especially in a story with so much banter, can be a tricky thing to do, and it would be very easy for the Doombringer aspect of her character to take away from the seriousness of her situation. But I think Neo Tegoel Games did an amazing job writing a realistic and down-to-earth portrayal of someone suffering through depression and suicidal thoughts. Winona's story is a powerful and important one, and it's one I think everyone could benefit from seeing unfold. Gloom and Winona are the two main characters, and obviously the ones with the most attention and detail put into them, but Gloom and Doom has a wide array of characters who are all memorable for their own unique, quirky reasons. Every character who has a sprite dedicated to them contributes to the story in some way, whether it be a time shaman who plays video games with Gloom and holds more significance later on, or a skateboarding angel who spouts out wisdom and Gloom actively seeks out on advice on how to kill Winona from, or even the more normal looking of the side cast, a lady at the movie rental store Winona works at, looking for a movie pretty close to closing time. Each member of the cast, even if they don't have a character arc or noticeable growth like Gloom and Winona, has such an engaging presence thanks to their great character designs and fun banter with Gloom and Winona throughout the story. There is not a single boring character throughout the story, and thanks to how bizarre but endearing they are, it's safe to say there's never a dull scene in this game, which is honestly really impressive. I only named off a few of the side characters, and I mostly stuck to ones who don't affect the big picture, end of the world stuff in a super direct way, because I want anyone watching this video to experience these great and unique characters for the first time with as little of an idea as what to expect as possible. Trust me, they're great. That being said, I did have to talk about the skateboarding angel because, well, he's a skateboarding angel. I got to watch him kill a demon with a skateboard, and that is amazing. Now for the story as a whole. I've covered it mostly when talking about individual aspects like the characters, but to summarize, in Gloom and Doom, you have an endearing relationship between a centuries-old wraith on a mission for redemption, and an unkillable suicidal girl that is every bit as heartwarming as it is fun to watch thanks to the hilarious and well-written dialogue. The story as a whole is about the importance of finding what makes you happy in life, via Gloom's side of the story, and realizing how valuable your life is and how you can have positive impacts on people you're not even aware of, which is told beautifully through Winona's side of the story. The story as a whole has a very 90s comedy movie feeling in the best way possible. And this inspiration for the atmosphere of the story is shown further in the numerous pop culture and music references, which will make anyone with a soft spot for really any and everything pre-2000s smile when they hear them. There's also some really great meta jokes about the future of music, film, and other things, because, well, this story was written in 2020, meaning it would be a shame not to throw in that type of humor, but it never feels forced. I also mentioned before that the messages or themes of this game are hopeful, which is most certainly true for the canon ending. But like I said before, you are presented with a ton of choices throughout the story, and depending on the choices you make as Gloom and Winona, well, you can see some pretty brutal and depressing stuff. One thing I like about the multiple endings is that while the true ending is definitely the best storytelling-wise, especially when considering Gloom and Doom's story as a whole, each of the other endings do feel like very real outcomes that are created by your choices. They never feel like throwaway endings put there just so you can see some brutal or depressing stuff. Each of the endings feel like a valid way things could have gone down, and did so because of your choices. One of the endings especially left me with such a bittersweet and empty feeling inside, and overall, I think it's just great to see a variety of different endings that make you feel different things that don't feel like throwaway bad endings like a lot of other visual novels do. One last random thing I would like to say before moving on is that the introduction scene to Gloom and Doom is absolutely delightful, and might be one of my favorite first scenes in any visual novel. Along with acting as a tutorial for the game via the dialogue of the characters, it does a great job of introducing you to the humor of Gloom and Doom, and setting up the campy, sometimes violent, and fun atmosphere of the story. I was sold on Gloom and Doom as a well-written story after the intro alone, and thankfully the rest of the actual story did not disappoint. Moving on to the artwork. The art of Gloom and Doom is very unique, opting for a more 90s hand-drawn Western comic book style, as opposed to the usual anime art style of most visual novels. While I admit I do adore visual novels, like The House in Fata Morgana, which has a very different, very non-anime art style, I typically just have a preference of the more traditional anime-style art in visual novels. I don't know why, don't ask me why, I will refuse to give you an answer. So all that being said, I was a little skeptical of Gloom and Doom's art going into it, but the first scene not only sold me on the writing, but also the art style. This rough-looking, but still really well-drawn art style just works so well with the tone and atmosphere of Gloom and Doom. It just adds to its campy but heartfelt 90s vibe, and having played the game, I could not imagine it working as well with a traditional anime art style. This unique art style just makes every character pop, with their great designs and varied facial expressions, and that even goes for Gloom. My boy over here is a floating, firing skeleton wraith in a robe, but still I can sense so much emotion and character from his facial expressions, especially his empty eyes, which are still so full of life. The backgrounds are all well drawn in this style and have some great details and references hiding in them, and the CGs also deliver. I think some of the CGs are better compared to others, but I think all of them stick to the art style well. And you have a great variety ranging from action-packed and hype-inducing to sad but beautiful, some funny ones for the hell of it, and so much more. Gloom and Doom has a ton of CGs throughout its story and even some quick animations which really enhance the few scenes they're used in. Its 90s-inspired art style also makes its way into the UI of the game, with different text boxes for Gloom and Winona segments, and a very arcadey feeling character select screen indicating which character you will be playing as in the next scene. Overall, you have a unique art style that harkens back to 90s comic books, which enhances the experience of Gloom and Doom's story greatly. Onto the soundtrack. The soundtrack is honestly what I have the least to say about. While none of the tracks were bad or took away from the experience of the game by any means, none of them, aside from the track that you hear upon first seeing the title screen, and the absolutely perfect ending credits song stood out to me. I think the tracks used in the game fit the scenes they were used in and the overall atmosphere of Gloom and Doom well, but in the end only the two previous tracks I mentioned left much of an impression. The first track, which you will be hearing a lot of as you reach different endings or just boot up the game multiple times, just has a really fun but still eerie vibe, which is a perfect introduction to the campy horror film atmosphere that the game has in abundance. And for the song that plays during the credits, Basic Dream 2, I really don't know how to describe it in any way but the perfect song to end the story of Gloom and Doom on. Sorry that last part was a weak description. Giving weak descriptions is something I'm known for though, at least that's what I'm assuming my professor means when he calls me a weak-willed individual. It is worth noting that said professor has a rare condition where the only words he is capable of speaking are, "You are a weak-willed individual, hopefully an OK editor 357, but I do really think he means it. At least I got an A in his Who Was the Weakest Well class. But overall, you have a soundtrack that is not bad by any means. In fact, the tracks are very well made and enjoyable. I just don't think they stand out much myself. There are just a couple minor nitpicks I would like to mention before heading to the conclusion. There is no CG gallery or ending list. The ending list isn't even that much of a problem, since you get an achievement for every ending, so that is a good way to keep track of how many endings you have completed and how many are left, but I still felt like I should mention it. However, I would really appreciate a CG gallery so I could see some of my favorite CGs without having to jump back into the story and skip to the scenes they're in. That's all I have for nitpicks in Gloom and Doom though, nothing game-breaking that is going to ruin the experience, just a couple things I personally found inconvenient. So overall, Gloom and Doom is a very well-written, roughly 3 to 5 hour long visual novel with some of the wittiest and most memorable characters I have ever seen. And steeped in all that great banter and wacky but still well-written and realistic characters, is a story with a very important message for everyone. Whether that message be about the importance of finding what makes you happy in life and pursuing it, or realizing that every life matters, even in the most hopeless of times when it may not seem that way, or just how effective a weapon a skateboard is against demons, Gloom and Doom does a wonderful job giving hopeful and important messages which may seem to contradict the gloomy title of the game. I'm so sorry. So I rate Gloom and Doom a 9 out of 10. You can get Gloom and Doom on Steam for $20, and I will leave a link to the Steam page, as well as Neo Tegoel Games website in the description. Now onto the Who is Best Girl segment. And the best girl of Gloom and Doom is... L'Oreal. I don't want to get too into her character, because I do genuinely think so much of the enjoyment of Gloom and Doom comes from meeting these characters and seeing how your first impression of them may clash against their actual unique personality, but I will say these two things. She is an awesome fighter, and her name leads to some great punchlines. These two vague reasons, along with her part in the story that I won't delve into, are why L'Oreal is my choice for best girl in Gloom and Doom. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed the review. Thank you very much to Neo Tegoel Games for the review code, and the opportunity to take a look at Gloom and Doom. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to seeing whatever you make in the future. Thank you everyone for watching, and until the next video, see you guys. Might as well have my Doom be brought as soon as possible. But first, the artwork. It doesn't matter how many times alcohol's gross, and anyone who says it is lying. It's dumb.